Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings. The goal of these briefings and my weekly radio show, Operation Freedom, is to provide you information the bought-off, lamestream, fake media will not touch. You can join us on the radio show. It's free. Every Sunday, you can stream it live from davejanda.com. We air the show from 2 to 5 Eastern every Sunday. Go to davejanda.com, go to the upper right-hand corner, hit the listen button. Great analysis, great guests. Information the bought-off, lamestream, fake media, tentacle of the deep state will not touch. In addition, we're obviously here on our YouTube channel. We're also available on davejanda.com. We have the free side, the public side, and also the subscription side. $9 a month, I believe, one of the biggest bangs for the buck in all of the internet. This is part 2 of the departure of the deep state's Jeffrey. Now, we split this in 2 to see if we could wiggle through some of the censors and wiggle through some of the monetization issues, but sure as shooting, we put up part 1 and guess what? It was not monetized and probably is not high on the search engine list. Probably because we spoke about Jeffrey Epstein, we spoke about human trafficking, we spoke about Jeffrey Epstein being a front for a number of intelligence agencies. For example, the CIA, Israeli Mossad, and MI6. Again, he is tied to Ghislaine Maxwell, this woman whose father, Robert Maxwell, was very networked with those intelligence agencies, and I believe that little apple, Ghislaine, did not fall far from the tree. By the way, we haven't heard much about her lately, have we? Let's see what happens there. Now, where we left off in part 1, what we were talking about is when, as a physician, if I'm in the emergency room and an individual is brought into the emergency room and is at death's door, if you will, has a significant medical event that has transpired. The question is this from natural causes, accidental causes, a suicide attempt, or was this a potential murder attempt, a homicide? Now, when you look at the homicide side of this, the murder side, remember, murders can be made to look like a natural event, and murders can also be made to look like a attempted suicide. So we always have to keep that in the back of our mind through this entire discussion as you watch other YouTube channels, as you watch other information being presented about Epstein and what transpired on Saturday, August 10th. Just keep that list in mind. Was this natural, accidental, a suicide attempt, or a murder attempt, homicide? And if it was a homicide attempt, attempted murder, could it been masqueraded as a death occurring from natural causes, or could it also be being masqueraded as a attempted suicide? Now, Brian Cates from Epoch Times, great website, great publication, they do great work. Cates, on the date of Epstein's death, August 10th, Saturday, August 10th, he had some information he put out. He said, look, for Epstein to have died, or for this to have occurred, a couple things. Number one, there must have been some gross incompetence, if you will, of the prison staff. By that, it meant that maybe they weren't doing the watches, and it's come out that Epstein was supposed to be monitored every 15 minutes up to every 30 minutes, and it appears there were some new guards on duty. How convenient that night. And it turns out that the bed checks, the cell checks, weren't occurring on that regular of a basis. It's also come out about the videos. Now, there was no video camera in Epstein's cell or in any cell, but it is my understanding there were many video cameras in that entire Metropolitan Correctional Center. And in particular, there were video cameras focusing on each cell entryway. Now, there is a report, and it has not been confirmed, so we can't jump on this, but in the days to come, I'm sure we will either have a confirmation or denial, that the video system had glitches Whenever you hear glitch, look out. And that there could well have not been operational during the time frame of which Epstein died. Now look, the deep state is not dumb. They learned from the Kennedy assassination. They weren't counting on the Zapruder film. So when you look at other events that have occurred that have deep state fingerprints on them, such as the bombing in Oklahoma City, and one of my frequent guests on the show, Colonel Craig Roberts, who was an investigator who was brought in early on the Oklahoma City bombing, the first thing he asked for was, hey, let's look at the videos because there are video cameras around the building and in the area. Well, guess what? The videotapes were missing. They were never found. So this scenario of all of a sudden the video feed goes off right at the time that an event happens with Epstein, to say the least, smells, right? So Brian Cates points out, look, there had to be gross incompetence, whether this was a suicide or a homicide. But he also pointed out that with Epstein being dead, you have to look at the individuals who were being outed. And he meant he's dead, and the Clintons are someone he either already implicated or was going to lead to, paid big money to have him killed, again on the homicide issue. And then he pointed out, well, that there are some reports out there that this could be, and I don't think he put much stock in this, but this could be an elaborate ploy to fake Epstein's death and get him into a witness protection program. He does point out to the bottom line, though, whether Epstein departed planet Earth as a dead man or whether he departed our attention in a witness protection program. Here's something Cates points out, and it's, I think, right on target. Litigation on items, so whether Epstein is now gone, let's say he's gone, he's off the radar screen, either dead or moved out. Litigation on items found in Epstein's mansion as various rich and famous and powerful people fought like hell to challenge the search warrant and have all evidence implicating them tossed out is rendered null and void. Nobody has any legal standing to challenge the warrant now. Now, this is really important. We'll get to it back in a little bit. He goes on, somebody like, say, Alan Dershowitz or Prince Andrew or Bill Richardson or any other powerful, influential people who had incriminating evidence seized by the feds from Epstein's mansion or any of his other properties that showed them having relations with underage minors had, in the past, had a shot at getting this evidence tossed until Epstein's death. Now they do not have a shot at successfully challenging the search warrant executed on Epstein's mansion. Anything found in that mansion or any of his properties is now admissible in court because Epstein is dead. Years and years of litigation just went poof for the folks that are being implicated. That's really important, and we're going to get back to that. Now, let's go back to our natural causes of death, accidental, suicide, or homicide. For a guy who, and as I mentioned in part one, the reports from the Bureau of Prisons, from the prosecutor, from A.G. Barr about an apparent suicide. An apparent suicide. Now, we're a number of days in this, and officially, they're still calling it an apparent suicide. One would think that, because there's another narrative out there that from an unknown source from inside the prison, that, well, when they went in, there was a bed sheet around his neck, and he had hung from a bunk bed. Interesting. If you look at the descriptions of his cell prior to now this report, it was always high ceilings, bed sheets made of paper, and this is from people who had been previous inmates there, a bed, or if it's a flat, or if it's a two-cell, two flat beds that were low off the ground, so you could not hang yourself from them. There were no bars, Now all of a sudden we're getting a report that through NBC and the New York Post that that there was a bunk bed in there and that he had sheets and he hung himself. Now, Epstein was 6 feet tall. And I'll tell you, from a biomechanical standpoint, 6 feet tall guy, supposedly he was on his knees when they found him, according to this now new report. I don't know, makes one question. Plus, this is a guy who other people had come in contact with him, didn't seem suicidal. This was a guy who had been meeting with his lawyers 12 hours a day, I believe even the Friday before he died. This does not sound like a guy about to off himself. And this came out. Did Epstein's lawyers set him up for death by convincing prison to end his suicide watch? So remember, at the end of July, he had this event. He was telling his lawyers and people around him that he was attacked, that this was not a suicide attempt, which could well mean why he was taken off a suicide watch. They investigated, said, you know what, and Jeffrey didn't try to kill himself. This dude over here, thought he'd make a name for himself and offed him. From Zero Hedge. As it turns out, Miami Herald reporter Julie Brown was right about Epstein managing to manipulate Metropolitan Correctional Center staff into letting him off suicide watch because, according to a report, Epstein's defense attorney successfully lobbied for him to be taken off suicide watch on July 29th, about a week before he was found dead in his cell. Found in his cell. The revelation comes as A.G. Barr warned any and all of Epstein's alleged accomplices on this past Monday that he would look over, quote, serious irregularities in the prison's treatment of Epstein, and that Epstein's death doesn't mean his co-conspirators will not be brought to justice. Before Epstein could be removed from suicide watch, very important, he had to undergo several psychiatric evaluations, allowing prison officials to make the move. So some people are implying that Epstein and his attorneys dumped money in somebody's pocket and all of a sudden he was gone. Well, maybe they did, but he still had to go through the clearance, through the psychologist or psychiatrist. And with such a high-profile guy, I don't think there's enough money in the world to make these guys move off of that. I really don't, because this guy is so high-profile. Then what happens is that we now have a preliminary autopsy report. Okay, now remember, natural, accidental, suicide, or homicide. Knowing full well that homicide can be a murder, can be made to look like a natural event, and can be made to look like a suicide. Epstein autopsy results delayed, quote, pending further investigation, end quote. This seemed very odd to me, because if this was a blatant suicide, open and shut, I'm sure at the medical examiner's office in New York City, they've seen thousands of these. It would have been open and shut, boom, decision made. Now understand, part of a medical examiner's exam is a toxicology report, which takes days, in fact, takes weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what they're looking for a complete toxicology report, where they're looking at were there drugs, were there poisons, looking at the organ systems, were there toxins or drugs in any of the organ systems. That's what takes so long. Okay. The much anticipated results of the New York City medical examiner's autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein have been released, saying its determination is, quote, pending further information at this time, end quote. It's a bit odd on a preliminary report on a high-profile individual who, according to a recent report, that was a sheet around his neck and he was hanging from a bunk bed. Odd that they would say pending further information. The statement from the chief medical examiner, Dr. Barbara Sampson, today a medical examiner performed the autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein. The medical examiner's determination is pending further information at this time. At the request of those representing the decedent and with the awareness of the federal prosecutor, I allowed a private pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, to observe the autopsy examination. Now, many people say, well, this is off the charts. Well, in high-profile cases, a lot of times the family or the attorneys or the estate will have an independent person there, pathologist, to review the take. Baden has this long track record. Some people have stated that he was involved in the autopsy of JFK when JFK died and got assassinated in 1963. Okay. If that was the case, Baden was not the forensic pathologist on the JFK case in 1963. Okay, just put that conspiracy. That is BS. Baden was 29 years of age. He had just completed his residency in pathology. In fact, he was just starting his first job in New York in the coroner's office at a low level, not somebody that would be brought in to do an autopsy. On the autopsy information from the Kennedy assassination, there's no Michael Baden doing an autopsy on him. Now where Baden was brought in was about 13 to 15 years later, starting in 1976, concluding, I believe, in 1978. The House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the Kennedy assassination issue and took a look at the Warren report. Their conclusions from looking at the Warren Commission report was drastically different that was put to the American public in 1963. In 1963, one lone gunman, no conspiracy, nothing, take it, gone. Okay? Very few of us buy the Warren Commission report. In the House Select Committee for Assassinations, what they concluded was that, in fact, with the Kennedy assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination, they concluded there was a conspiracy. Baden was brought in along with a team of pathologists to look at the information from the Warren report, and their conclusions were different from what the Warren Commission report had concluded. So to say that Baden did the autopsy on JFK, sorry, no, not true. Went on with the report. My office defers to the involved law enforcement agencies regarding other investigations around this death. If it was an open and shut suicide, this would not be the verbiage in the preliminary report. Inquiries regarding the determination of the chief medical examiner should be directed towards my office. Bottom line is, that is not a report that is indicative of a slam dunk, no doubt about it, this is a suicide. Caitlin Johnson wrote a really good piece called Everyone's a Conspiracy Theorist, Whether They Know It or Not. This is at medium.com. Plutocratic propaganda. Now, this is really important because remember, again, ties to the intelligence agency with this dude as a front, running a leverage operation with his handler, Ghislaine Maxwell, tied CIA, Mossad, possible MI6. Plutocratic propaganda outlet MSNBC has just run a spin segment on the breaking news that the medical examiner's determination of the cause of Jeffrey Epstein's death is, quote, pending further information, end quote. Quote, our sources are still saying that it looks like suicide, and this is going to set conspiracy theorists abuzz, I fear, end quote, said NBC correspondent Ken Delanian. Oh, listen to this. NBC News has been hearing all day long that there is no indications of foul play and that this looks like a suicide, that he hung himself in his cell, end quote. Okay, there's the spin, right? Now, Delanian, the guy who's mouthing this stuff. What's his tie? Delanian, who stumbled over the phrase conspiracy theorist in his haste to get it in the first soundbite, is a known asset of the CIA. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a well-documented fact. A 2014 article in The Intercept titled The CIA's Mop-Up Man reveals email exchanges obtained via Freedom of Information Act requests between Delanian and CIA public affairs officers, which, quote, show that Delanian enjoyed a closely collaborative relationship with the agency, explicitly promising positive news coverage and sometimes sending the press office entire story drafts for review prior to publication, end quote. And this is the guy saying, oh, slam dunk, suicide. There is no reason to give Delanian the benefit of the doubt that this cozy relationship has ended. So anything he puts forward can safely be dismissed as CIA public relations. This is from Caitlin Johnson. Up until the news broke that Epstein's autopsy had been unable to readily confirm suicide, mass media, bought off lamestream fake media headlines, everywhere have been unquestionably blaring that was known to have been the cause of the accused sex trafficker's death, that being suicide. This despite the fact that the FBI's investigation has been explicitly labeling it as a, quote, apparent suicide, end quote, and despite the fact that Epstein is incredibly believed to have been involved in an intelligence-tied sexual blackmail operation involving many powerful people, any number of whom stood plenty to gain from his death. So things are moving in a very weird way, and people are understandably weirded out. The response to this from mass media narrative managers has, of course, been to berate everyone as, quote, conspiracy theorists, end quote. Which brings me to a phone call and a number of feedback I've gotten, said, Dave, on a number of issues, people accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist, but in fact, you present conspiracy fact and conspiracy reality. And these people said, Dave, based on how this death of Epstein is playing out and the fact that he even is dead or gone, everybody in our country can now be considered a conspiracy theorist. But to back up Delanian, right, who would come through? The New York Post on Monday night comes through with Epstein hanged himself with sheets tied to bunk bed. Now, this is drastically different from all the pictures we've been seeing of what his cell looked like, right? According to an anonymous law enforcement official source, the New York Post reports that 6-foot-tall Jeffrey Epstein was found hanging in his lower Manhattan jail cell with a bedsheet wrapped around his neck and secured to the top of a bunk bed. So why are they calling this apparent? Why isn't this a slam dunk? Why did the medical examiner pass on this the first time in the preliminary report? Doesn't add up. The convicted pedophile apparently killed himself by kneeling toward the floor and strangling himself with the makeshift noose, a noose made of a bedsheet that supposedly was made of paper. Okay? We are no experts, this is from Zero Hedge, but a 6-foot-tall man kneeling with a makeshift noose made from bed sheets tied to the rail of a top bunk would take some serious discipline to fight any survival reflex and actually allow yourself to asphyxiate? Yeah. So this brings me back to, and let's tackle one of the issues that Brian Cates had talked about that is actually gained a fair amount of steam through the internet, and that is that Epstein didn't die, that he was moved out. And a lot of that was based on this 4chan report that came out about 10 minutes actually before it was officially announced on Saturday morning, August 10th, that he died. And here's what was said. Last night after the 4:15 bed count in the morning, they took him to medical in a wheelchair front, cuffed, but not one triage nurse says they spoke to him. Next thing we know, a trip van shows up. We do not do releases on weekends unless a judge orders it. Next thing we know, he's put in a single-man cell, not according to now this report from the New York Post. See, so the story's shifting. And my friends in law enforcement tell me when the story starts shifting, that's where you're getting the jive. That's where you're getting the misinformation. Hangs himself. Here's the thing. The trip van did not sign in, and we did not record the plate number, and a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van, according to the tower guy who let him through the gate. You guys, I'm shaking right now, but I think they switched him out, end quote. This from 4chan. This has not been confirmed. But it has been confirmed that he reportedly had a cellmate who was moved out either late Friday night or early Saturday morning. So maybe there is some truth in this 4chan report. Maybe what was being seen was the roommate being moved out, and reportedly it has been said that Epstein was really quite the chatterbox, and maybe they moved this person out because maybe we're going to see this guy later in the story come down the line where he is presenting information of what Epstein told him about what he had on other people. And maybe this guy was the guy who was moved out. We don't know. But there are a number of folks that believe that Epstein was moved out, and because Epstein was moved out, that he is in a witness type protection program. I think the chance of that is small. Is it zero? No. On the other hand, I think it's more likely that he's dead. The question, natural, accidental, suicide, or homicide, and if it is a homicide, could it be made to look like a natural event such as with toxins and poisonings or with drugs? Or two, could his suicide, maybe this bedsheet thing was a setup, they killed him, and then made it look like a suicide. Bottom line is, he's off the planet. Okay, whether he's in a witness protection program or whether he's stone cold dead, the bottom line is he's off the grid. He's off the charts. But that doesn't mean the evidence is. I spoke to a number of prosecutors and said, look, how does this play out for those that potentially are entwined with him, either as co-conspirators and also part of these pedophile activities and part of these human trafficking activities? And the answer I got from the prosecutors is, look, Dave, they might have initially taken a big sigh of relief where Bill Clinton goes, whoa, that was close. Hillary, we dodged another bullet. What they tell me is, in fact, Epstein's death will make it more difficult for the co-conspirators and for all these people that Epstein had information on. And the reason is because of something called standing. Now, an important note, after Epstein's death, and this is what Kate's alerted to earlier, and he's on target, no one else will have standing to challenge the search warrant on his house or any of his properties. Everything obtained, and he reportedly kept really like a backup system of records, handwritten. Everything will be admissible against any other defendant without the possibility of a motion to suppress. It was my understanding that a number of big-name players were lawyering up and actually starting to focus on how they could try to block the search warrants before Epstein's death, try to push his attorneys to block the search warrants. And by blocking the search warrants, it would withhold evidence. That's all gone. All these people are exposed. This came out from the Britain's Mirror. According to a report in Britain's Mirror, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, who reportedly killed himself while he awaited trial for alleged underage sex trafficking, kept detailed diaries that could spell trouble for his elite friends. Quote, the royals went to church after it emerged Jeffrey Epstein, who killed himself in jail. He kept a meticulously detailed diary of his friendships with the rich and famous, according to the report. Look, natural. Could it be natural? 66-year-old guy going down, heart attack, myocardial infarction, a stroke. God knows how much coke he shoved up his nose over time, how much drugs and alcohol he had consumed in the past. Is it possible? Sure, it's a possibility. Is it a probability? Not so much, but still. Accidental? No, I don't think he fell off the toilet and hit his head. Suicide? Possible, but again, that preliminary coroner's report really points to something else going on here. Yeah, I know about the report with the sheet around the neck and that kind of thing. Homicide. Could it have been a homicide where he was injected with a poison to either stop his heart or shut down his nervous system? Yes. Can it be a poison that actually, in high end, would dissipate over time before an autopsy and toxicology would be obtained? There are agents like that. So could a homicide, a murder, be made to look natural? In that case, yeah. So, for example, if the coroner's report comes back and we couldn't find anything and, wow, we think he probably had an arrhythmia and died. There you go. There's another scenario as it relates to electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies, that could be used to induce death. And I'm going to get into that more in my WTF show on the subscription platform. I've spoken to a number of different individuals on this, and yeah, it is entirely possible. And it's also entirely possible that what could have been used, if you will, to, rather than just flipping a switch off on the video cameras, to scramble or shut down a video feed for a period of time. Could a homicide also be made to look like a suicide? Yeah. If video cameras are down, you don't see people entering, or persons entering the cell. Say he's injected with something, and then they string him up. Possible. Natural? So keep in your mind's eye, back of your mind, the ensuing days and weeks: natural, accidental, suicide, or a homicide, murder. And if it was a murder, remember, murders can be made to look like a natural occurring death and also can be made to look like a suicide. So just because there's this one report now there's a bed sheet that reportedly was made of paper around his neck, one would think the preliminary autopsy report would have been a slam dunk. This was suicide. No need for further investigation. We'll keep you apprised as time goes along. I thank you for your time. I hope you'll join us on the radio show every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern. I hope you'll become a member of our Freedom family and subscribe to our subscription platform, 30 cents a day, $9 a month. You can sign up for a month if you don't like it, get rid of it. Not sure why, because the information and guests we present really, really are cream of the crop and will provide you and keep you ahead of the curve as it relates to what's transpiring around our country and around the world. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thank you for your time today.